All right, well, let's get started. Welcome back. Hope your week's been going well. Sorry for my absence last week. I was dying, or I hoped I was dying. I would have been fine dying. No, I had the stomach bug or maybe the plague, something. It was just unpleasant. And I prayed very intensely for the return of Jesus in between, throwing up, but nothing yet. But about a day and a half later, I was, better. And then a couple of days after that, Lucas had the joy. But yeah, it was. I'll spare you details unless you're really wanting to know. So talk to me afterwards. But let's just say it was unpleasant. So today we're going to talk about two of the Ten Commandments, because we don't want to skip any of those. It'd probably wouldn't be right to do so. So we're gonna address two of them. Exodus chapter 20. That's where we're at. The Ten Commandments. Also, it's actually the list is also in Deuteronomy chapter 5, and we got about 40 years in between those. Moses, right before the Israelites or that new generation is going to finally enter into the promised land, he kind of gives a recap. Let me remind you of the heart of the Ten Commandments. And actually, let's go there for a second. Deuteronomy chapter 4. The Ten Commandments start in chapter 5, but Deuteronomy chapter 4. Remember there in Exodus 19, the heart, the idea of what Israel is to be is a holy nation, a priestly nation, right? It's a holy nation. In other words, a set-apart community and a world of different nations and people groups that reflected their gods. Israel is to reflect the exclusive presence of Yahweh God, right? Lord God. And because of that, they are to be priestly towards the other nations. Well, what does that mean? Well, now 40 years later, they're about to go interact with a lot of nations. And this is how Moses expounds upon that. Chapter 4 of Deuteronomy, verse 4, see, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, surely this great nation is wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them, the way the Lord your God is near us when we pray to him? In verse 8, and what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I am setting before you today? Now, maybe Moses was doing kind of what parents do a little bit, where you kind of daydream how your kids will come home one day. Just be like, Father, I appreciate thee so greatly, and thank you for all your wisdom, and, you are the best dad ever. And then you wake up, and your kids are screaming, and that kind of reality. But he's here, in a sense, kind of creating this idea that what it means to be priestly is for you to interact with other nations in ways that makes it clear to them what it looks like to have Yahweh as your God. And it will be so uniquely different that they will inevitably compare and contrast their nation, their way of life, how it is to be under their government, and and what it looks like to be you, a people that have God. And they will say to themselves, what a blessed group of people, because your God is near you. Now, we take that for granted. Yeah, I pray directly to God and Jesus intercedes. Hey, a world of gods, it was kind of tricky and stressful, Because then maybe like your crops don't do well, and then you're trying to realize like, what God did I offend? And then you got, what do I have to do to kind of get in good, and have good rapport with that God? And so then you got to go light this and burn that and, sacrifice this. And you have all these gods, and some of them are petty, and some of them are cruel, and some of them are a little moody. But what is Yahweh all about? He is the God who comes down from his cosmic heavens to a mountaintop and sets up this whole covenant, which is where we're at in Exodus 20, right? He sets up this whole covenant, and he enters into a relationship with these people, and then he comes down from that, and he is then with them in the tabernacle that they are to take, and he is with them. Not out there some cosmic place, and who knows what those gods are doing. He is with them. And then also, verse 8, they will say, this Moses imagining here, what other nation is so great to have such righteous decrees? Okay, righteousness in the Bible, it doesn't mean just doing right. It's in the context of the biblical narrative, it is doing right by one's relationships. It is a term, it's a relational term. So to be righteous decrees means that the laws you have are so that you can have relationships done right. With that in mind, let's go back to Exodus 20, where we're at in our 10 Commandments here. Exodus 20, we've covered all the way to number 5, honor your father and mother. And today we're going to cover 2, thou shalt not murder and thou shalt not commit adultery. And not a whole lot's expounded upon that, right? Some of the other ones, there's a little more give and take and some more details. 10 Commandments, they're not the only commandments, right, of these righteous decrees. They are 613 of them. 10 plus 603, that's kind of given, it's given in spurts throughout the next 40 years here. But the 10 Commandments are the heart of it. And they're basically divided in two segments. Your interaction with God, Yahweh God, and thus your interaction with each other. Okay? These are not laws in the sense of like legislation, as one might think about. They are relational decrees. You with me with this? It has to be how you treat others. So your relationship with Yahweh, the first four there. And then the next 6 are your relationship with one another. Father and mother was the first one of those that we started with. So now, you shall not murder, and you now shall not commit adultery. Well, those seem intuitive enough. It kind of makes for, it's kind of a bummer to have community where you just go around killing folks. It doesn't, not to get political, but have you watched the news, right? Can you see the tensions where that's just a thing out there? And, wherever you want to land on the details of each one of those cases. But what a mess. Come on. What a horrible mess. And is that making for just a lovely community? Oh, these United States. I don't know if we're all that united on some of this. It's rocking things to the core. So just this willy-nilly, you can go out and murder and all this mess. You cannot have community that way, right? So that should be intuitive. Same thing with like you just run off with your neighbor's spouse. It's not very neighborly. You with me on this? It's just not very neighborly. So it kind of makes it's hard to be a unique community. Not just a community that gets along, it's also because Israel wasn't, once again, structured in a way just to be a community that got along. It was structured in a way by its very essence to be a community that was a showcase to the rest of humanity of what it looks like to have God. I hope I said this when we talked about don't bear the name of the Lord in vain. We talk about it's not just cussing, it's how we treat each other. But there's one other layer. If I didn't say that then, I'm going to say it now. It's don't carry the name of God in a way that does not reflect God. Let me say it differently. When people think of Christians, that title, Christians, what comes to mind? Hypocrites, right? There's a whole study done 20 years ago. I'm assuming that's still accurate. That is because Christians have been carrying the name of the Lord in vain. They've been bearing the name wrongly. Is that a right word? Wrongly? In an incorrect way? English is not my first language, so you got to bear with that. So they've been reflecting something that is not true of God, of Christ. So when we carry the name Christian, yet you live in a way that's not Christ-like, you are breaking this commandment. You see the seriousness of it? And we're still struggling with it. We're still struggling with it. Okay. But, well, that's the end of our class. Do not murder and don't run off with your neighbor's spouse. Thank you for coming. Jesus still doesn't want us to do that. Yeah, but let's go to Matthew 5. Okay, let's give more details of this because Jesus gives more details of this. Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is what we wrongly call a Sermon on the Mount. It's descriptive, but the end of Matthew 4, Matthew says the good news of the kingdom. That's what Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is really about. The good news of kingdom. The end of chapter 4 also has a description of who's there, who's listening. And it's the absolute nobodies of that world. It's those that have been on the short end of the stick. They have no money, no political power. Nobody goes to them for like, hey, what do you think is wrong with society? What do you think is the solution? They are like deneglected, okay, deneglected. And Jesus, interesting enough, is going to offer this beautiful explanation of kingdom to them first, to them, like the nobodies, which is, I think, intentional. What's happening here, Matthew is all about the Old Testament. He is deeply steeped in the Hebrew Bible, what we also wrongly call the Old Testament, but the Hebrew Bible, the backstory. And Matthew starts in Matthew 1, verse 1, where he says the genealogy of Jesus, that English word, and then in verse 18 where it says the birth of Jesus. Both of those words in Greek are the word Genesis. Where do you think Matthew wants you to go? To Genesis, right? The first couple pages of your Bible. So what Matthew is claiming in Jesus is that Jesus is the genesis of humanity done again. It's like, let's do Genesis one more time, shall we? Okay? And it's in Jesus. And so then the whole birth narrative of Jesus is a direct compare and contrast to the whole beginnings of Israel. So there's that layer coming on as well. In Exodus, leading up to Exodus 20, Moses brings the people of God, right, or brings this group to Mount Sinai, where Moses had seen and interacted with God. So he brings the people there, and once again, God, out of his cosmic heavens, like, his reign, he comes down to this reality on a mountaintop, a high place, which the ancient world, that's how you got close to the gods, was a high place. So a high place connects you to the world of God. That's why the Tower of Babel was a super high place, but that's a different thing. Okay, so then the Mount Sinai becomes the connecting point of two worlds, the cosmic world of God and the physical world we live in. Moses, actually, do you understand God invited the entire people group, all the entire assembly to go up the mountain? But when things started rumbling up top, God is there. They got so freaked out, they said no. And they asked Moses to go in their place. So Moses goes and will intercede back and forth. He comes down with the 10 Commandments, and basically it's like a wedding ceremony in parts, like there's elements to it. And so they're like setting up to be, in a sense, married to God. And so the 10 Commandments, Moses comes down, gives that. Moses goes up a few different times. Then he goes back up, and he's there 40 days and 40 nights. The folks down at the bottom, they get a little anxious. What they do? They build a statue of a golden calf read the text carefully. They're not replacing God. They're making an image of Yahweh. Now, they're making an image in a way they understand of gods that they've interacted with, but they're trying to like box God in this little image that they've crafted, and now that's going to be our God, and we're just going to, mold Yahweh in our image, in what we want God to do. Now we have him, off we go. Well, that doesn't play well, of course, because do they not remember the Ten Commandments that was just given to them a few days prior? It's like in that moment, they basically break almost the first 6 commandments. First 4 for sure, right? Okay. Here in Matthew, we have the same imagery being represented, or being symbolically reenacted. Where does Jesus give these words from? A mountain. A mount. Okay? So that's why we call it Sermon on the Mount. I think Jesus is doing that on purpose. Jesus is trying to be the new Genesis of humanity, to build a new people group gathered around him. Matthew introduces him at the birth narrative as Emmanuel, God with us. Right? So God with us. Not down at just floating in some cosmic mountain or at the top of some mountain. He is in the flesh. So where the mountain was this connecting point of 2 worlds, Jesus is the connecting point of 2 worlds. Now, he's also sitting on the mount, right? Because that's where you connect with the gods, the high place. So he's sitting there claiming to be the connecting point with God, Yahweh God. And now he is going to give us the equivalent of like the 10 Commandments. Actually, he addresses a lot of the 10 Commandments in chapter 5. But he's going to take it to a deeper level, and we're not going to walk through all of the ones he highlights here. We're going to walk through 2, murder and adultery, which, interesting enough, he also addresses. But, like the whole, they're supposed to be a holy nation, a priestly nation, what we just read also in Exodus, or in Deuteronomy, they're supposed to like showcase the presence of God unto humanity. Interesting. Jesus wants them to still do that here. Chapter 5, where he starts, you're the salt of the earth and all that. Let's skip down to verse 14. You are the light of the world. Okay? A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Well, Jerusalem was on the hill. Jesus is playing off of that. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and gives light to everyone in the house. And here's Jesus' version of what God was already saying in Exodus and Deuteronomy. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and give glory to God with you. You see what he's doing? It's the same concept, God with you. Now, interesting enough, though, just like God selected, by the time Exodus, the whole Mount Sinai is happening, who's the great people of God? But a bunch of just slaves, like the nobodies of that world. Who's the great people here that Jesus is empowering to be the changing, transformative light of a broken world? The nobodies of that world. You with me on this? So where's the true power? Then and in Jesus. God with us. That's Genesis 1 forward, is the presence of God that's transformative in the middle of the chaos. And so Jesus here is making the same point. Okay, murder. Jesus here is going to do this compare and contrast with the 10 Commandments, the essence, the law, and what the law was really trying to do, but in Jesus we can. Okay? So he'll do this whole thing 6 or 7 times. You have heard it say, but I tell you. Okay, so I, God with you, and you got to put all that imagery there. You have heard it say, verse 21, that you have heard that it was said long ago, 1,500 years was the 10 Commandments. You shall not murder. And once again, he's quoting Exodus, right? Or Deuteronomy, either one is fine. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Judgment from God, right? You cannot have a community that claims to have the presence of Yahweh, which God, the very essence of God is one of love, community, compassion, betterment, beauty, all that life. You can't just be killing each other. The Bible does not claim that God is the only spiritual being out there, quote unquote, lowercase God. Okay? The Bible claims that God is the only source of life. How can you be a community that's about murder? Like, how? How can you be a community that's about murder if God is the definition and source of life? So obviously that doesn't play well. Okay, but here's Jesus, though. That's not enough. You do understand that's still a law today. Barry, is that still in the books? Thou shalt not murder? Are folks out there murdering? Maybe they've never heard thou shalt not murder. Y'all need to, we need to put it out there. Maybe folks don't know. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. Of course they do. So why is that not enough? Maybe we should make it really intense. Thou shalt really not murder, just kind of really. There's been some communities throughout the world that have tried intense, immediate punishment. Has that curbed murder? It hasn't. And it won't. So what is Jesus saying? Thou shalt not murder is not enough. It's not enough. We need to go more. We need to be transformed deeper. So here's how Jesus put it. But I tell you, and that I is I, Emmanuel, God with you, the genesis of humanity, all that carry there. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother or sister, that's the plural term there for anybody that's angry with one of the community. That's what it's saying there. Anybody that's angry with one of the community will be subject to judgment. Who's doing this judgment? God. God. Again, anyone who says to one of the community, Raka, is answerable to the court, or anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fires of hell. Well, that's intense. You ever say fool to somebody? Or Raka? I don't know. That's Raka, that sounds like Klingon. This will date me a little bit. Anybody, Mr. T? Do we know who that is? The A-team? Okay. I pity the fool. Yeah. Well, apparently, I'm sorry, Mr. T is going to burn in hell, according to this. Well, no, listen. The point isn't those two words. The point is what those words then meant and symbolized and reflected. The essence of what's going on is this. Once again, you cannot be a people, a community that claims to have the source of life, yet be murderous. Those things don't go together. First of all, that's the very reason that when God said, if you eat of the fruit, if you roll your eyes at me, and you go do your own thing, hashtag whatever makes you happy. That's what the kids do these days. So some of you are not in tune with all that. That's fine. So you go roll your eyes and do whatever you want, and you're just going to take for yourself, and you're going to define what's right and wrong, and you're going to be the gods of your world. Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to be moving away from the source of life. Consequently, where do you think you're headed? Death. God isn't just being petty. You don't play with me, I'm going to burn. You're all going to burn. No, if God is the source of life, anything away from God is towards death. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's that layer. But Jesus is like, that's not enough. By the way, what's the very next story in Genesis after Genesis 3? Genesis 4, what are we doing there? Family member killing the other. It just goes downhill. They step away from God. We're just murdering folks. But in the community that Jesus comes to do over, because humanity has deeply struggled with this, the community that Jesus comes to Genesis again is a community that's not only not going to murder, it's going to be a community that's going to intensely work on the fact of not hating one another. Not being angry with one another. And the whole raka and all that those were terms of contempt. What does contempt imply? I'm better, you're less. So whatever I do with you is fine. Welcome to humanity. Where have we not done that? When have we not done that? There's the us and the them, and of course the them are less, and so that validates we stomp upon people, we use and abuse, and we do whatever we want. And there's been entire stories of people groups that's their story. The Assyrians were brutal. They almost brought the 10 tribes, almost all of Israel down to nothing. Almost annihilated the nation. They were brutal. When they fell to the Babylonians that were also bad, folks cheered. Folks were just thrilled. And then, the Babylonians were bad too. And then, so that didn't go well. And then they cheered when that fell to the Persians. But from the Assyrians to Jesus, we're talking about 700 year-ish. It's that story repeated. People just in contempt of others, using and abusing folks. The Assyrians were so brutal, they skinned people alive just to make a point. They'd go in, kill some folks, and put a bunch of their heads on a stick. Be like, hey, that's what happens to folks right there. It's very contemptuous. How do you get to that degree of seriously something wrong with you? You start with contempt. You start thinking less of folks. You start having some anger towards people. You start validating hatred. Well, of course we hate them. They did this, that, or the other. They deserve it. And you go from that inevitably to death, to murder. So Jesus is saying, listen, we got to backtrack this. We got to pull back that train, and we got to start where the heart of it is, which happens to be one's heart. We got to work there. Oh, I never murdered anybody. Well, good for you. You're the bare minimum of humanity. But that's not what we're called to be, the bare minimum. It's like when I'm talking to college students and, they're talking about dating somebody and he's really a good guy. I'm like, well, congratulations, the bare minimum. That's not enough. What else should he be? He can't be less than that. We cannot be just, we don't murder. Oh, I know. Those people on TV, I never did that. Yeah. Have you ever held people in contempt? Have you ever had a sense of superiority? Have you ever treated people with condescension? Well, welcome to the mess. You're just on the spectrum of that. We're part of the problem. And so the whole fool and rock and all, that's the heart of that. I don't think fool and rock, I mean anything to that degree today, right? Like I said, it's even become kind of cool. I pity the fool. But there's ways there's categories, there's statements, there's names we throw out there that hold the same kind of deathly meaning. Some racial slurs, come on. We cannot be like that. We cannot be like that if we're going to be God's people. He doesn't stop there. Therefore, once again, English is not my second language, but I'm going to imagine that therefore means because of all I just said. Is that fair enough? Anybody? Where's Tim? He's an English major. I think this is right. So because of all I just said about how we're to do humanity, here's where the rubber meets the road. If you're offering your gift at the altar and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the altar, in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Here's the imagery. Israel had a place for forgiveness. Israel had a place of reconciliation. That was at the temple. That represented the presence of God. So you would go to the temple, you and everybody else. So especially during the Passover, which by the time Jesus comes around, 200,000 pilgrims would have made their trek to Jerusalem. Some estimate more. So that's a lot of sinful people needing some forgiveness. So you would go to the temple, certain gates at the temple, and you would take a little lammy, little lamb. If you made a long journey, you just buy one. Or if you were super poor, you could do a pigeon. Okay? So you would get in line, you and everybody else, and you're there. Think about this. It's like a petting zoo gone wild, right? Everybody's holding animals and pigeons and, and the bird, and then you're in line there. It's super hot because it's just hot in that part of the world. And you're standing there in a line. It's like going for a ride on Six Flags. You're there for a couple hours, but at the end, somebody dies, okay? So you're walking, you're in line, and then you're talking to folks about, hey, so what brings you to the line this year? Oh, man, you don't know. I've had thoughts of violence and murder. Oh, man, did you murder somebody? Oh, I've been so close to murdering my mother-in-law, but I haven't yet. So, that kind of thing. So you're just talking about all these struggles. You get there. The priests have been at this since morning. By the time you get there, the priests, they start out in white. They meet you at the little door there, and you bring little Lammy. And the priest comes and be like, my child, what have you done? And he grabs your hand, and he's all bloody. And have you ever been to a butcher shop? Anybody remember what those are? Yeah, imagine that. Blood everywhere. He's got a knife, And he puts your hand on top of little Lambie and be like, what have you done? And then you kind of confess your sins, and then he just goes on little Lambie. It's like, and you're like, and people behind you are like, that's his first sacrifice. You're just over there. Your children are screaming. Yeah, that's what he says right here. You're bringing your gift to the altar. Why? So that you can be made right before God. Because that right there, what little Lambie's still, kicking and stuff and blood squirting everywhere, getting on your fancy sandals. That is what you deserve. That's what you deserve. But thankfully, little Lambie, who doesn't know better, is dying on your behalf. Okay. You're there to reconcile with God Almighty. And you remember, oh, you know what? There's some folks there, I haven't done right by them. They got some stuff against me. I haven't treated them right. You know what he says to do? Somebody, hold little Lammy for me, Daisha. And you just go and you fix that. Then you come and reconcile. What's his point? It's like the 10 Commandments. The first 4 have to do with what? Your relationship to God. But then what about the next 6? Is your relationship with one another. So if you're not doing relationship one another, what you're claiming to do with God it's not really significant. Here's how John says it in 1 John. You claim to love God, yet you hate your brother, you liar. Just flat out. You liar. That's what's happening here, okay? So fix that, work that out. All right, because of time, let's skip the next 2-3 verses there. Go to 27. 27, it's the same essence. 27, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Once again, that's not a bumper sticker. That's the 10 Commandments, right? 10 Commandments. But I tell you, once again, I, God with you, I tell you, if anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Oh yeah, pause that for a second. Interesting that he goes straight to guys right there. He doesn't generalize it. Not that women can't lust and all that, but he goes straight to men. Historically, what gender has abused the other? Men. Have used and abused women in so many categories, so many ways, and just throughout history. It's horribly, painfully sad that that's the legacy we have as a humanity. And it's every people group under the sun has. Just peruse through history or listen to some music today. It's all using and abusing, often women. And so he just goes straight to that. If we're gonna be a people group that claims to have Yahweh only, we cannot be a people group that use and abuse each other, especially as historically men have had the power. And men have used and abused that power. Especially in the time of Jesus. We're still doing it, but especially in the time of Jesus. So I never ran off with the neighbor's wife. Oh, but you run off with her every night. in your head. Every night. You've already committing it. The damage is already being done. Okay, where is the damage being done? It's a victimless crime. Yeah, where's the damage being done? In your heart. You're the victim. You're the victim. Now, of course, you're also victimizing people that don't know they're victims. You're using and abusing. You're taking people without consent, and the consent isn't even, oh, but she was okay running off with me. So that's not the point, is you are taking people and you are using and abusing them with a little video you play in your head just because you want to, because your pleasure takes precedent over people's dignity, over people's rights, over the community of faith. Does that make sense? He says, and Jesus isn't some kind of like grandpa prude, like, oh, it's the devil. Yeah, no, that's not Jesus. Jesus would have grown up hearing parts at the synagogue, hearing parts of Song of Solomon just sung out loud in church. Yeah, go read that. When was the last time we had a sermon on Song of Solomon? Asked him why, okay? So, can I be there when you ask him? Or better yet, pick out some verses from Song of Solomon. Say, Tim, what does this mean? And I'll just be over there like, yeah. Okay. So Jesus, it's not Jesus like, sex, the devil. That's not what he's doing here. Jesus is so intense about this idea of not using and abusing people. Here's his solution. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your body parts than for your whole body to be thrown in hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. Wouldn't that be something? The preacher's preaching there, hey, this and that. And the next time he's over there, he's like, hey, so, glad y'all are here. Next guy, he's like, oh, so glad to hear y'all are here with me. Okay. That would also be problematic. What? Okay. He's not saying go mutilate yourself, because very few people would be left. That's not his point. He's using here a very intense language, okay, hyperbole, to make a crystal clear point. This is serious. You got to cut it out of your heart. You have to be intense about cutting it off out of your heart, because evil, it'd be like cancer. It's a horrible, horrible disease. If you go to the doctor and, the doctor says, I'm sorry, you have cancer. We're going to have to do some intense surgery and chemo and I don't want to do that. Why not? Can we just let my cells coexist? It's kind of judgy, isn't it? They just doing their thing. Can't we just let them interact and hang out? How absurd would that be? What do cancer cells do? Spread, destroy, kill. They're not there to hang out and be buddies, long walks on the beach. They're there to do what they do, destroy. This in your heart destroys. Destroys you, destroys community. We have a multi-billion-dollar sex industry out there. You think we're not paying for that? And I don't mean money. We're paying for it as a humanity. We're paying for it. Now, seldom do people want to connect the dots. We have all these horrible sex crimes out here and different things because but we're paying it. Okay? That's the world we're in. He says it's better to lose parts of you, the bad parts, right, than to burn in hell. Okay, I don't think he just means eternity. The word hell in the New Testament has both an after, on the other side of eternity, and it has a geographical backstory to it. We don't have time to look into all this, but the word that's translated hell, it's the word that literally means grave, and it's the word used for a geographical place just right outside of Jerusalem. It's the valley of slaughter, and the word slaughter is translated hell. Okay, if you go back to Jeremiah, the point Jeremiah makes, why Babylonians are coming to destroy Jerusalem in 587 is because at this valley of slaughter, the valley of Topheth, Israel, with its back kings, Manasseh, a couple other kings, they literally burned their children to foreign pagan gods on that geographical place. They burned in the fires of slaughter. They burned their children to foreign gods. Because of that, God through Jeremiah says, you Jerusalem, you will burn in your hell. He literally meant it. Babylon's going to come, kill a bunch of you, pile you high right there, and set your bodies on fire. You're going to burn in the hell you created. You with me on this? And so what he's saying is here, not just on the other side of eternity, but he's saying you will burn in the hell you're creating if you use and abuse people in your heart. Today, in this lifetime, you will be burning in the fires that you are fanning when you are using and abusing people in your heart. How intense is that? It's not just on the other side of eternity, it's now. And we as a humanity, we've been burning in hell for quite a while. We've been burning it. In part because of this. In part because of hatred and anger. We're paying for it now. Once again, watch the news. We cannot be a community that participates this way. We cannot be this way. We have to be a light unto this darkness of hell. Into this hellish existence now. Yes, there's an eternity, but now. So that's what Jesus is doing. He's not just talking about the other side of eternity. I'm crystal clear on that. So, murder, adultery, it's serious, folks. It's serious. It just devastates communities. The victims are endless. We just don't have the courage to name it. And whatever the world does, they don't listen. They're going to do whatever they do. That's their thing. But here's what those that claim to gather around Jesus should be doing is this right here. You want to be the people, the new genesis of humanity around Jesus? You want to be the people of God that are holy, priestly unto the world? This is serious. This is serious. So next time we are going to continue. We're going to go back to 1, thou shalt not steal. So, all right, go ye and don't burn in the fires of your hell.